What is going on, my people? This is your host, Blanche Eden with Black Trending News. This is episode 9 in season 3. Please go ahead and check out season 1 and 2. Let's get into it. My goodness. So, Dwyane Wade did an interview either today or very recently, yesterday or whatever. And the interview was about, it's centered around his family life, his wife, Gabrielle Union, and, getting full custody of his children, that transition into being a full-time dad. He also touched on the transitioning of his son, Zion. So the interview centered mostly around that. I'm going to do a part 2 about that interview. This particular episode, I want to talk about his previous relationship with his ex-wife, Savon Funches Wade, or Savon Funches. They were married in 2002, and within 6 years, Wade filed for divorce in 2007. He settled with his ex-wife for $5 million, and she gets $25,000 a month at the time. This was reported in 2013. She was getting $25,000 a month in spousal support and an additional $10,000 for travel and expenses. Who knows what the current situation is with that now? And they have 2 sons together, Zion and Zaire. One thing I didn't know about Dwyane Wade is the abusive past that him and his ex-wife had. It was very startling when I heard her testimony and her side of the story. And again, this is a one-sided story because, I don't believe that I've seen an episode of Dwyane Wade speaking on the abuse of his wife. So this is a one-sided story we're gonna get into, but it's interesting to see her side of the story, and it not necessarily about the two of them, but just bringing. I always like to shed light on domestic violence, and I'm always trying to pertain what other people are going to our own lives. All of us can connect. Same thing with T.I. and Tiny. I definitely connected with that situation, and this is even more intense than that. She really goes into depth. She explains the first time that things got really heated between them on the phone. And normally that's how it starts, with a verbal conversation. She admitted that she stayed married to him regardless of the verbal abuse and the disrespect. She stayed. I'm not going to give too much away. Let's roll the clip.
I would say the first time it started to get really bad was the summer right after he'd been drafted. That summer following the draft, I was over the phone with him, and he had said something to me very, very angrily. And I was telling him about the way he was speaking to me, to stop being disrespectful and things like that. And he told me, do you want to go and live in your mother's house? Because that's what's going to happen. You're going to end up back living in your mother's house in Robbins. Well, he's still there. Yes, I was very shocked. But the threat was like, do you want me to, somehow cash you out of our house and put you in a position where you're back living in Robbins in that house? And it was a very, very awful feeling. And I would say that we stayed together, yes, but from there, now that I look back and I can reflect on it, I would say from that moment, it went downhill.
As an NBA wife, are you all expected to pretty much allow your husbands to cheat and just don't say anything?
Well, first of all, I want to say, not now. I'm not an NBA wife. I'm not an ex-wife. I'm not a basketball wife. Thank God. I finally know who I am and I have my own identity. But at that time, I certainly was married to him and the game and the lifestyle. And I do think that that's the expectation. Absolutely. You're seen, but you're not heard. And it's so many other women, so many other wives that I've had the opportunity and been fortunate enough to console, and they have consoled me. And yes.
So you would think, though, just saying, as an outside person looking in, you would think that when these basketball wives are married to these, these men who make millions of dollars, what other reason could they not be happy? You would think that would be the life. Why did you have to console these women? What were they so hurt and upset about?
Well, it all depends. I mean, there were women who were physically abused, emotionally abused, financially abused. There were women who had, at the same time that they were pregnant, their husband had gotten another woman pregnant. There was a lot of adultery going on, and it was just awful. It was awful. If you name it, it was happening.
Was that new to you, though? I mean, when you and Dwyane was in high school and going through college, you never had really issues of him cheating on you or dealing with other women?
I had an issue in college, yes. Yes, we did.
So did you think once you got married that issue was going to change?
No, I didn't think it was so much marriage that we're doing. We were actually married at that time that happened. But I was hoping after we got past that, and resolved that issue, that we wouldn't have to revisit it.
I also want to touch on how she mentions the power trip that in the conversation that they had, when she mentioned him threatening her to take their lifestyle away from her, saying things like, do you want to go back and stay with your mother? Do you want to go and be broke again? Do you want me to get rid of your ass, basically, because you're not complying to my mistreatment? You're not allowing me to just walk all over you and do as I please. She also, speaks about the mistreatment of other women in the same situation as her. It's nice to know that there is a network of basketball wives that are supportive. It's unfortunate that it has to exist. I was watching something the other day that was, I really want to do an episode on this, and I think I'm going to have to. It's just getting around to pulling the research together. But the nuns, there's the congregation of the basketball wives, there's a congregation of nuns that have been secretly raped, molested and abused. And she's saying the same thing about the basketball wives of these rich men. There's women that are not rich that are getting abused. It's just to show you that no matter what your financial status, abuse is really all across the board, and you cannot look at someone's marriage on the outside like you do these celebrities and say, oh, their life is perfect, because every time you see them, they're smiling on the red carpet. That does not equal perfection. I'm so happy she told her story. It's a very humbling interview. It's not fancy. It's not NBC. It's in her home on a couch. You could tell it's not, it's not high sedity, recording, background lights, cameras. It ain't all of that. It's very humbling. It's very small. It's very, just very regular, and that's why I really appreciate this interview, because I feel like she didn't, take the cash and say, oh, I'm only going to talk if I get paid. It doesn't, I'm not getting that impression from this interview. So I would have to say that I admire her for her courage, because it takes a lot of courage. I'm sure she has, an NDA somewhere in her past where she cannot speak about these things that are taking place. She's just probably just not allowed to speak on it. So kudos to her. This is a very long time ago. This interview, took place in, I'm going to make a wise guess, maybe 2012 actually. Took place in 2012. Yeah, so that's a pretty long time ago, and to see him resurface with his happy family, maybe he's gotten some help for himself. Maybe he's no longer angry and abusive. I don't know. Moving along, let me go ahead and play some more of this clip.
And when you got down to Miami, I guess it's obvious that it was revisited. How did you address issues of infidelity with Dwyane, or was he having affairs in Miami?
Yes, I was hurt. I was angry, of course, but I would say more than even being hurt and angry, I was very, very disappointed, because Dwyane had never been just my husband. He had been first my very best friend. So it wasn't just like somebody cheating on somebody or somebody wronging someone. It was the kind of hurt that comes when a best friend turns on the other one.
Ms. Blanche, were you there when, I know you were there, but how were you there for both Dwyane and Savon when everything just becoming chaotic in Miami? Who would listen to you? Who would not listen to you? Who were you trying to talk to? What did you do? Did you try to intervene?
Again, like I said, I was only on one side, and that was God's side. So whatever was wrong that I saw was wrong, I told him. It's a shame if someone sees something and don't say something. So I said what I had to say when it needed to be said.
Were you lonely, Savon, in Miami?
Absolutely. I absolutely was. I remember thinking, I lived in a $4 million house, fully furnished, with loneliness, abuse, betrayal, sadness. It was hard. It was the most difficult time probably in my life.
Did you ever feel as though the betrayal of your ex-best friend, your ex-husband, would escalate to this point that we are today, that you all are in today?
No, I never would have imagined that it would have gotten this far. I have seen sides of him things have come out of his heart that somebody could have paid me to believe.
So she goes on to speak about how previous to signing this big deal and this big bonus, there were still issues of cheating going on in their relationship. In college specifically. And they were married at the time, she says. So I guess the lesson learned is when you're in a relationship, when you're in a marriage, you try to stick it out. And I believe I said this in another episode the other day. Like, women try to have this idea, and we've been indoctrinated and conditioned to stick it out with our husbands and stand by our man and make sure that this works out and they end up happily ever after. And it makes me nauseous sometimes to see the struggle of happening on national TV or in the tabloids. It's bad enough that it's happening. Now it's, publicized. So it's, if I could do it again, I wouldn't stick it out. I just wouldn't do it, because I learned that if a man wants to do that, if he makes these choices to do that, to get out early, if I can do it again, I would get out early. I wouldn't stick around to see what's going to happen or believe his bullshit. I just wouldn't do it, because that's mostly what it is. These men get caught, they say they're going to change, and they don't change. So, I'm a firm believer in once a cheater, always a cheater. I'm just a firm believer in that. I have never experienced anything different. If you have, let me know in the comment section. Please let me know if you've experienced being cheated on and your man never cheated again. Please, I want to hear it, and I want to talk to you. Okay, let me go ahead and play some more of this interview.
So you saw the changes right before your eyes?
I absolutely did. I watched them happen, and I tried to stop it from happening. I literally can say I tried to save him from himself, who I saw him becoming. I tried to sit down with him. I tried to reason with him. I reached out to Coach Riley. I reached out to Coach Riley's wife. I reached out to other wives married to NBA players and sought their advice when I noticed it was happening, that he was changing, and changing for the worse. There's nothing wrong with change. Mm-hmm. But changing for the worse is bad. And I saw him, in exchange for money and fame, selling his soul. I saw him taking, his character and exchanging it for yet another endorsement or yet another fan. And that was the problem.
Now I'm going to ask you this, and we're going to go to break. But can you honestly say that at one point in time, maybe you saw yourself changing a little bit too?
Oh, absolutely. I went through it. I did. Mm-hmm. I think that everything, when I first got to Miami and I was able to observe other families, mm-hmm. other players, other women who were married to players, it was almost like a mental checklist. And I would say, those are things I never want to do. I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to be that kind of wife. I'm never going to do those sorts of things. Because I saw some women angry. I saw them I saw some women sad. And I watch women go from sad to getting even. And I was saying I wouldn't be that type of woman, Mm-hmm. But it seems like almost everything I said I would never do, I ended up doing it. There's a few things I missed on the checklist, but my change and my transformation, my wake-up call, my realization that this is not right, and I have to get back to who I am and be true to myself, regardless of what the bank statement says. Mm-hmm. It just came very soon. It didn't take me long to
Well, I'm
wake
glad that you did wake up. And I'm just going to tell you seriously, I'm just asking because I just want to know out of curiosity. Is he still in there?
Yes, he is. In spite of him trying to have me arrested, in spite of him suing me, and in spite of people forging my signatures, that's what you do to your real child. You don't disinherit them when they do something bad.
You just discipline them.
You discipline them. Now
that, Miss Blanche, is what I call unconditional love.
I love how she is so transparent. She's so calm and just really easy to listen to. It doesn't strike me as a woman that doesn't deserve to have any custody over her children. She claims that she was rich and lonely. I believe it. 100%. It makes me think a little bit about other things I'm going to get into this part 2. Not right now on this episode, but maybe a little bit. I think her history gives us a little bit of glimpse into his current marriage. I think that it's women, we tolerate so much. I'm just glad that she's not tolerating it anymore. I personally feel like she's learned to move on and just to never deal with that again. And that's the lesson that I hope most sisters learn when they go through something like this, is that they don't do it again. Because I feel like if it hasn't come down hard on you enough, you will make the same mistake so fast you don't even realize you're making the same mistake. So it's very important when you get out of an abusive relationship to stay very conscious of your next relationship and be very aware of what you are doing. Not necessarily the other person, but what are you doing? To be very conscious of your behavior. Let's keep going with what she's saying here.
Now, Savon, when you were in Miami and you was going through all that turmoil and all that distress, you had plenty of friends, didn't you? I mean, the other basketball wives, you wasn't really connected, or did you have any friends in Miami, or?
I mean, I did. I at least thought I had a lot of friends, you know. More friends than somebody could count, you know.
And would your friends come back and tell you something they were seeing that Dwyane was doing?
Yeah, they definitely would.
And your reactions would be?
I would be hurt. I would be angry sometimes, disappointed.
Were you two violent with one another?
Has it ever gotten physical?
Yes.
Yes, it has.
And I have a report here in October 2006 that you actually went to the hospital and you were pregnant.
Yes, I was pregnant with Zion.
And you admitted having abdominal pain.
Yes.
Can you tell me what happened here?
Oh, how I sympathize for this woman. Please clap if you've been through this. I could really understand what she's saying. I'm very moved by it, and I have a lot of sympathy for her situation. One thing, I'm just gonna retouch on what I said before. This was her best friend. Usually, and a lot of times, and just speaking for myself as well, in an abusive relationship, it's usually you and that person. A lot of the times you guys are together a lot. You become very dependent on this person. I know how that feels. So, and she was trying to hold on to that, and I get it. Like I said, if I can do it again, I would let it go. Because if it is meant to be, and if it's for you, it will mend itself and it will come back. I truly believe that, and you have to believe that too. So if you're in a situation and you keep holding on to this thing, it's gonna explode eventually right in your hands, and you're gonna suffer from that. You're gonna suffer from that explosion because you're holding on to it, and it's ticking and it's letting you know, I'm about to blow up. But if you refuse to let go, honey, well, sorry for your hands. You have to know when to say, if this is meant to be, it will happen. You have to have that confidence in a relationship. And it hurts, and it's very hard to do. It's very much easier said than done, because it took me a very long time to do that. But she explains in great detail how she tried to hold on. She did everything. She spoke to people. She brought mediators, and so she tried to bring people who were familiar with him, but he just kept changing, and that is scary. Let's keep going, because she really, really she talks about some really great stuff, so I'm gonna go ahead and keep going.
Well, shortly before being hospitalized, I was in Florida, and I woke up in the middle of the night because I was sick, obviously with the pregnancy, and I noticed that Mr. Wade wasn't in the house. And so I was calling him because it was probably like, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and we went to bed together, which means he must have gotten up out of the bed and just left in the middle of the night without telling me. And so I was looking for him. I looked around the house. I was calling his phone. He didn't answer. He finally got back several hours later. It was well into the next day, and I was very upset. I was angry. I was, asking him where was he and why did he just leave without saying anything.
Rightfully so.
Me.
Rightfully so.
Yeah, I was his wife. Rightfully so.
Rightfully so.
And his response to me was first being verbally abusive. He was cursing. He was calling me names. He was telling me shut the F up. Women talk too effing much, and I need to know my place and things like that. And then that made me more angry. That made me say, what is he talking? Women need to know their place, and why is he speaking to me like that? And then it turned into physical violence.
Wow. Okay, so I'm not gonna say a damn word about the selling of the soul, because I don't get into that type of conversation. But it does say a lot of things, right? It says a lot of things on her perspective on what he has done, selling of one's soul can be such a general phrase. I don't know what she means. She doesn't go into too much depth when she says that. She does talk about other women doing some real crazy stuff, like, and she was like, I'm one of those women. And I'm just like, you know what, I understand you and if you are, I'm telling you, if you're listening to this and you in a relationship, get the fuck out before you start spying and lurking at night and doing all kinds of stuff just to catch him. Get out, because if you are doing that, if you're doing that, that means that he's definitely doing something. I'm telling you, because when you look for something, you're going to find it. It's just a matter of time. And if you have a feeling, you're probably right. Go with your instinct. Trust yourself enough to say, you know what, I can find better and I can do better than this. But she's very insightful on a world that maybe a lot of us have never experienced. And it's kind of, it's exciting to listen to. At the same time, it's very sad and disheartening. Okay, so before we get into this part of it, she gets very descriptive on, just a little, disclaimer. She gets very descriptive on what happened between her and Dwyane in a bathroom. If you do not like violence or you do not want to hear this, just a warning, a heads up. It made me uncomfortable. I had a lot of flashbacks. And if you're sensitive to stuff like this, fast forward it, or, I definitely understand. But just know that she's going to get very descriptive on what happens next in her relationship and what was basically her last straw. And I'm very glad it was her last straw. Unfortunately, it had to get to that point, and for a lot of us it does. But hopefully it won't for you. You know what I'm saying? Like, let it go. You know what I'm saying? And it's hard, but you have to figure out ways to, you got to get a new hobby. Figure it out, start, invest in your career, do something in your life that's going to keep you busy and focused, and not in an abusive relationship. It's really not worth it. Let's go ahead and finish listening to her remarkable story.
The physical violence. He picked me up and held me over his head, literally in midair, and threw me down in our bathroom.
While you were pregnant?
Yes.
And I just want to make sure we clarify. He knew you were carrying the child.
I'm not sure what he knew, but we had Zion on purpose. We planned that pregnancy.
So that's what I'm saying. So he knew you were with child.
Yes.
And he picked you up.
He picked me up, and he slammed me down. And we had an ottoman in the bathroom at that time, a piece of furniture in the center of our master bathroom. And he slammed me down so hard that when my back hit the ottoman, it broke into 4 pieces. And then my back and my head hit the concrete, the marble floor, in the bathroom. And then after that, I got up and I immediately went, there's a cordless phone in the bathroom. I immediately went to that phone and I was crying, I was hysterical, and I went to go call the police. And when I did that, I would say more hell broke loose. At that point, I suppose because he was in fear of being exposed, because I certainly was going to call the police. And I picked up the cordless phone, he snatched it out of my hand, and he threw the cordless phone against my body so hard that the phone literally broke into pieces.
Are you serious?
Yes, I am. Unfortunately.
Was anyone there when it happened?
Yeah, there were a couple of people there. No one was inside of the master bathroom. Actually, when I tried to run out of the bathroom, he came and with his body barricaded the door. Then he reached behind him and locked the door and stood with his body in front of it so that I couldn't leave the bathroom. So the only thing I could do was scream. At that time he had a gun in the house, and I was very afraid because the gun was in the closet. And we were right there by that closet, and him being so violent, I became very desperate to get out. I just remember thinking, I really need to get out of here. It's way beyond out of control.
Honestly, at that point, do you really remember, as far as, when I say remember, as you're speaking to me, are you going back to that moment?
Yes, I am.
Did you really, honestly in your heart, feel as though that you were in fear for your life?
Absolutely. Without a question. I knew when he picked me up in the air like that, when the furniture broke in pieces, and the amount of force that he was using, I was even able to realize how physically strong he was at that moment. It was it was very scary. It was literally terrifying.
So when the phone was broken, how did you get out of the home?
I was screaming, and then eventually there were other people in the house, and he had a male cousin that came to the door. And I don't know if he came in the door, busted in the door, or how he got in, but I know that the door eventually got open and I was able to get out. And from there, I left the house. I left Miami.
And you went where?
I went to my mom. I went to my mom in Chicago.
Because this is where you felt safe?
Yes.
And this is where you actually checked to the hospital?
Yeah, when I went to my mom's house, I didn't want to say anything to anybody else just because of the threats that he was making when I said I was going to call the police. So I went and I told my mom what had happened, and that same day, like right when I got into her house, thank God I at least got in her care by that time, I literally fainted. And so my mom was picking me up off the kitchen floor, and she drove me to Christ Hospital.
As I read this report, it says that you had abdominal pain.
Whew, my goodness. Yeah, I don't think there's much I could say after that. I've said everything that I said when I was watching it the first time to myself privately with the mic turned off. Very, very unfortunate that happened to her. I'm so glad that she's okay. When I saw her broken arm, I remember when I saw the interview for the first time, I was like, oh my God, why is her arm broken? But she didn't talk about it, not to my knowledge. I didn't see it in the interview when she talked about her arm. There's more to the interview if you want to catch it. I could leave a link down below. If you're listening to this, it's obviously, a reason, right? As again, we're all adults. We're going to do whatever we want to do. We're going to do what we want. But sometimes we need to do what we have to do. Not necessarily what we want to do, but what we have to do and what we need to do. And that's usually the hardest. Don't stay in an abusive, I will continue to chant this for the rest of my life. Don't stay in an abusive relationship. It's not worth it. She is so lucky to be alive, and her child is lucky to be alive after what he did to her that day, according to her story. Thank you so much for listening. Leave a comment below. Share this video. This is the first time I'm seeing this, and this is such old footage. So I'm sure there's a lot of women that haven't seen it. Sometimes it really helps to hear another person's story, to reflect on your own life. I like to see stuff like this, even though it's hard to watch. It's just a reminder that you have value and you're worth being free. You're worth being free. I don't like the word I'm single. I don't like that phrase. I'm free. I'm free until I find my love. Have a good night, and thank you for listening. Bye-bye.